And we are live on the stream. And it is 9 o'clock. I know I am late, but I ran into another rabbit hole, as usual. Go ahead, retweet that. Boom, bow. Go ahead and like and share this. Boom, bow. And then we will go on to Udemy. Complete Blender course for beginners. Open up that Blender. Open up that Blender. And we'll get after it. Animated lamp. Obviously I need to IK limit, so now we're in the timeline. Cool. Learn a little bit of animated stuff.
Hello everybody and welcome back. In this lecture we're going to have a quick look, a review and a recap and a bit more knowledge on the timeline itself. Now the timeline is currently hidden down at the bottom here. You may have already hidden it away. Let's say you have and you've made the window disappear. You can come down to the lower corner, drag up a new window, preferably in the horizontal plane because that's kind of what a timeline is. It's going to progress from the left to right, show us when things are happening. I'm going to click on the editor window type and find myself the timeline. Now conveniently it's under the animation column and we'll be having a look at some of the other types of editor window that you can use when animating in a future lecture. So here we have a timeline. It starts at frame 1, that's quite common, and it goes all the way through to whatever frame that you have happened to set as your end frame. So currently, and we set this right at the very beginning, we're going back a few lectures here, so we have starting at 1, ending at 300. If for some reason we wanted to change that, say we wanted it to end at 200, we could either type that in directly here, or with the playback head, let's say over 200, we can go to playback and set the end frame. And there you go, it's as simple as that. I don't want that, I want it at the end of 300. So that's really useful, being able to play, left click, drag along here. You know, you're going to find it quite useful as we start developing our animation to be able to click and just scrub backwards and forwards a particular area. Whilst you may not get it playing back at a smooth rate, it's very good to see if there's a problem at some point. I'm sure there will be as we start moving it around. You may find at one of these frames that suddenly the lamp flips to a different direction. And that's a key point where you may have to add in a keyframe to prevent that from happening, or indeed look at the animation overall. Our timeline is going to be quite simple, but you can zoom in and zoom out as well. That's incredibly useful knowing that you can do that. For our simple animation of only 10 seconds, that's not a big issue, but on larger projects, that may be something you need to be aware of. Speaking of larger projects, I would always suggest breaking things down into smaller subsections of animations rather than trying to do one big thing at once. And that's typically the case. That's why whenever you watch a film, whether it's animated or not, it has short scenes. You very rarely have a long scene with the camera looking at one thing for a long time. It often switches and changes about. That gives you more flexibility as an editor. You can swap things in and out. It also gives you more scope if you make a mistake that you don't have to re-render an entire hour worth of render where you only need to do a few seconds in between. But since our lamp, let's say jumping onto our box over here, is pretty much the whole animation, it's only going to last 10 seconds, we don't need to worry about switching things up like that. Now one of the things that's incredibly useful on the timeline is you can add markers, and that's this end column here. We've got the option here to add a marker. We can jump between markers, and I find these markers incredibly useful. So for instance, if by frame 150 we wanted the lamp to have landed on the box, we can, with our cursor, that's the important thing, with our cursor over the timeline, press the M key. Now unfortunately, F150, frame 150 is what that stands for, isn't a great name. We can go ahead and we can select markers and drag them left and right. And if we want to rename them, Control and M. So we can come in here and say landing and click OK. And of course we can go, let's say, at frame 40, we might want the jump to happen. So we go M, Control and M, jump. Now these are only placeholders for the moment. I have no exact plan of when things are going to happen, but if you start to plan out your main scene like this, it can be incredibly useful because you start to have an idea of when things need to happen by. So if we know that at 240 I really want my lamp falling off, so 240 I want it to, let's say, marker here, Control M straight away. Oh, did I hit the right keys there? I'm not sure I did. With the cursor over the marker, there we go. And I'm going to call that the crash landing. I think it'd be quite cool to have our lamp jump up here. I'm going to do a quick animation, way, and when we're up there, for it to go, splat, and hit the ground. Now, obviously, at the moment, this is rotating around something, the 3D cursor, no doubt. I'm going to change that back to medium point, and then, yeah, way, splat. There we go. So there's my animation in a nutshell. But as we start putting it together, let's reset all of those movements. As we put this all together, it's going to start to feel more and more like an animation. Oh, I think I undid too much. My marker here has gone back. Let's call this crash landing again. There we go. Perhaps I didn't click OK or press enter. Occasionally when you're renaming something, I think if you don't press enter twice, it's not going to accept it. Now, I like the frame numbers themselves. Some people may prefer the time along the top. So if you go to view, you can show the number of seconds. Now, you don't see the frames and the seconds at the same time. So as you can see here, we're going through, and after 30 frames, so it got up to 29, 30 becomes 1 second, and so forth. So this is frame count, and then total seconds. Personally, I'm just happy with it showing the number of frames. I know we're working at 30 frames per second, and unless there's something you really need to key in and get perfect, then this will be absolutely fine. Now, I'm not going to give you an official challenge for this lecture, but what I would like you to just practice is moving about the timeline, making sure you're comfortable with that. Make sure you're comfortable with creating some markers. These may or may not turn out to be useful during this particular section. And the other thing is just double check that you have the right number of frames and you have the right frame rate. That's going back right back to when we started setting our animation specification under the render tab. Sorry, not under the render tab, under the output tab. We have a start and end frame and our frame rate. So that is still how we had it set before. Now, one of the things I will do whilst I'm in here actually is the resolution of 4K. I'm going to put it in as just back to 100% for the moment. Otherwise, I'll be wondering why my renders are taking far too long. Okay, I'm going to save my work. It's always important to save your work often. Brilliant. So go ahead, pause this video now. Play with the timeline. Make sure you're comfortable with it because we're going to be using it quite a bit over the next couple of lectures. And I'll see you all in the next lecture. Hello everybody and welcome back. In this lecture we're going to talk about keyframes. Keyframes are going to enable us to create an animation very similar to this. I've got a few other tweaks in here as well, and you can see it runs with LookDev as well, and it will work kind of with cycles, but we can't really play that back in real time. So when we're assessing animation, we'll often use something that's a bit quicker to see, even though we won't see the full final render as it would be in cycles. So let's hop over and find out more. Okay, so we're starting in the default scene at the moment because I don't want to ruin my current lamp setup. I know I can revert back, but also this is a much cleaner environment to work with. If you don't have your timeline at the bottom, you can make it appear. Let's make it disappear by just grabbing one of the lower corners and perhaps bringing up another 3D editor and switching it across to it's in the animation column, the timeline. There's also an animation section at the top here, workspace, that you can switch over to if you want to. Now, because we've got, because personally I have very minimal space on my screen, I'm quite happy using what I've got in front of me here. So keyframes, what are they? Well, they're a recording of where something is at a moment in time. So for instance, if I was to open up the property sidebar here, we've got our location, our rotation, and our scale. But keyframes aren't just limited to that. Pretty much everything in Blender can be keyframed. There are some limitations, though it won't affect everything, but nearly everything can be. So for instance here, if I wanted to add a keyframe to the location to say this is where the cube starts when we press play, well, we can hover over this area and press the I key, or we can right click and insert keyframes. And underneath we have a little extra, so we can insert a single keyframe. So I right click on the X column, I can insert a single keyframe. So what happens if I just hover over this section here and press I? The whole lot goes yellow. Now the moment I move the cube elsewhere, you notice it will go orange, indicating that the information there is different from what it is on the current keyframe. So if I was to move the playhead to somewhere else and come back again, it won't remember where it was previously. And that's something that will catch you out from time to time. You'll move, let's say, to frame 40. You'll move your cube to somewhere else that you want it to move from and to, and you'll go, oh yeah, that's good, and then you'll click elsewhere and it will snap back to the beginning. So it's incredibly important to just bear in mind that when you move your cube or rotate it or scale it, let's do this now, let's press G, move the cube, then we go over to the area that we want to key and press I, and there we go, that is now keyed in. What happens when we play this back? Well, let's go back to the beginning. We're going to jump back to the very beginning of the animation and press play, and there we go, we've started to animate something. Now, one of the things that often catches me out is, let's say on frame 40 we wanted to rotate it on the y-axis by a number, 61 degrees, there we go, and we go and key that in. The problem is we never keyed in a starting frame, so when we go back to frame 1, it's not going to automatically rotate round. that's something to just bear in mind, that if you're planning on doing a rotation, a location, and a scale, or even any of the other parameters within Blender that you can key in, and you can also do this with materials and so many things, it's incredibly powerful what you can get up to. It's always good to key in the starting value before you start tweaking anything else. So for instance, in this case, I knew it was 0, 0, 0, so then I can key that all in. And then when I press play, it's going to both rotate and move at the same time. So that's it basically, and you can add more and more keys in. Now ideally, you don't want to key every frame. That would make your animation quite jerky. As you can see here, placing keyframes at specific points will make your animation very smooth. However, what can happen is you might end up with pieces of your model passing through others because you're not explicitly controlling it between these 2 points. You're literally saying between here and here, interpolate between these 2 positions. And we'll talk about the graph editor in a bit, which says how it makes that movement. And at the moment, we're dealing with the timeline and shortly the dope sheet as well, where we really are looking at when things are happening. Finally, here on the timeline itself, if you wanted to, let's say, this is the cube, object transformations, if I was to left click on those, I can move them earlier or later. And that's incredibly useful, because what that means is I can adjust the speed of an animation. As we get to the lamp actually jumping, you will find that where you thought things should be, you might need to make it a bit shorter. Let's say you're jumping up, you go up in that arc, you reach the high point, you slow down at that point, then you come back down again, and you're probably going to get the timing of that wrong the first time round. But armed with this knowledge of inserting keyframes, it's time for you to make your first pass at animating your lamp. And your challenge is to animate your lamp. Now, we're not going to do a full animation at this point. I want you to focus on broad movements, not focusing on detailed movement at all. Focus on those major movements. Where's your lamp going to be? How's it going to jump up? Remember, we're animating in pose mode when we do this. Except sliding and passing through other objects. If that happens, that's going to be tidied up as we start processing the animation as we go through the next couple of lectures. Pause the video now and give that a go. Hello everybody and welcome back. Let's go ahead now, hop on over into Blender and start the animation of our lamp. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up our animated lamp. So this is where we left off before, and I want to make the broad movements to the base, so I'm going to make sure that that's selected. And of course we do want to make sure that we're back at frame 1. It's very tempting to go all the way back to 0. Now there are a couple of ways of getting all the way back that you may have noticed. If you hover over here, you can go shift and left arrow and it will take you there. You can also just type in number 1 here. Now I'm going to do the broad movements here, and I'm probably not going to have these markers. That to me doesn't feel right. The landing is probably going to be much closer, and the crash landing may be a bit closer as well. I don't know at the moment. And the jump, we're going to crouch down, we're going to jump up, I think, and take it from there. But I'm going to look from the side, and I'm going to say, well, to start with, let's set the location and the rotation. I'm definitely not scaling, so that's okay. And I'm going to work just on the base for the moment. So let's say we were going to jump. I'm going to look from the side, and I'm going to say, well, to start with, let's set the location and the rotation. I'm definitely not scaling, so that's okay. Ways of getting all the way back that you may have noticed. If you hover over here, you can go shift and left arrow and it will take you there. You could also just type in number 1 here. Now I'm going to do the broad movements here, and I'm probably not going to have these markers. That to me doesn't feel right. The landing is probably going to be much closer, and the crash landing may be a bit closer as well. I don't know at the moment. And the jump, we're going to crouch down, we're going to jump up, I think, and take it from there. But I'm going to look from the side, and I'm going to say, well, to start with, let's set the location and the rotation. I'm definitely not scaling, so that's okay. And I'm going to work just on the base for the moment. So let's say we were going to jump. We might rock forwards or backwards. We might rock backwards, so I'm going to rotate this around ever so slightly, just a bit subtly. And I need to make sure that I'm going to go G, Z. I'm going to press Z twice to just lift it up. So it's rocking on the back here. Now there's a better way of doing that. Let's just key those in, because I'm going to rock to the front now. But I'm going to use the 3D cursor to do so. Although now we're in the middle, it'd probably be absolutely fine to just go like that. Okay, so I was just thinking that if I had it set to the 3D cursor, I could have easily pivoted it up, but then moving the 3D cursor back might not have worked. It would have only worked at the moment because I'm in the center of my scene. I did accidentally key in quaternion then, so I'm going to right-click and delete that keyframe. Clear keyframes, by the way, will clear all keyframes that you have used, so do be careful with that one. So at this point, we're going to rock forward. See, it's flying at that point, so that is an issue as it's going across here. Really needs a midpoint where we're back down on the ground. So G, Z, Z, Gonna lower that back down, key that in, and key the rotation as well. So now we're there, back there, and then we're going to jump up. And I don't know, jumping around here, and we're going to make an arc, something like that, to land. In fact, we'll probably do with it being a bit closer, but we'll run with what we've got at the moment. So we're going to lift this up. I'm going to put it all the way up there. We're probably going to be a bit more tilted forward and key those in. Then the landing, let's say it's going to be about there. Move it down, rotate it round. Let's key those in. And again, this is rough and ready at the moment. And then, of course, we're going to rock forward. There's probably going to be a bit of sliding here, but that's also okay because this is something that is going to be sliding, isn't it? Because we're going to, or certainly I'm going to, slide this off ever so slightly. So I'm going to do that. And that's going to take a little longer to get to the edge, and I know exactly where the pivot point will be. Just about there. And as you can see, this process is a little bit repetitive, and then the crash landing is going to fall off, hit the ground, rotate round, come up a little. Yeah, something like that. So that's a reasonable start. So let's just play that through and see how we're looking. We're going to jump up, land, and obviously there's a bit of sliding there, and then we're going to fall off. And that's a really subtle falling. That's not very quick at all. So let's see if we can just drag that back. So get to the edge and then boof. A bit too quick. So we can start tweaking now and moving these keyframes about. Now I'm trying to do the rotation and the movement in one go, if nothing else, for my own sanity. So I've not got tons and tons of keyframes to move around. They're all happening at the same time. That's not necessarily the way you would do all animations. It's just cutting corners at the moment. Right. Now we go through and we can do the top bit of the lamp. So we grab the control bone and then we're going to animate that. Now we've lost the other markers here, but we can run through because that is fine. Because this is going to be an independent. So we've got it shifting back. So we're going to key in our starting position, because if we don't do that, we'll lose the information. So we've got a moment here. In fact, at this point, we've got all of the other keyframes where they're happening. So I'm going to press G and just move this back. So I'm going to press the Y. I don't think that can go much further back, actually, because of the limitations we put on it. So that's fine. And then here, I'm going to skip that other keyframe, and I'm going to start to stretch this out. Maybe even tuck up, ready for the jump. Yes. There we go. And then the jump itself, we're going to stretch out at this point. Key that in. And as we start just going through the process again, so we're going to land here. We're obviously going to be back. Key that in. Here, we're leaning further back. Keep pressing a lot of keys here, and we don't want it to twist through itself. This is one of the issues if you popped your control just a little bit too close to the model, you can end up with it flipping round. In fact, I don't mind it flipping round because it's going to look at us at this point. So let's go jump up, land. That's too quick. You notice it snaps across. So we just need to watch out for that. The way that we can start sorting that out is making sure it's not inside it. So we go G, X, and then it's definitely looking at us. It's also pulled it towards us as well, which I'm not sure I want. But let's see what it looks like when we animate it. So land. Help me! And at this point, I think the lamp should be looking to its doom. So let's bring this back round, and probably down as well at this point. So let's just run that through. Help! So that swings round and doof. Now at this point, we don't want it just splatting on the floor and going through the floor. So we're going to grab this out, pull it out, and it's going to be around there, I think. Make sure we key that in. I almost skipped back then. So we've got this, and it just goes doof. I'm going to add in just a little bit of a bounce here. Let's see what that looks like as it comes off. Lands. It's okay. These can probably be a bit closer together to give it the appropriate effect. It's just, yeah, okay. I'm going to leave it like that. I did say to you guys, didn't I? Do not concentrate on detail, and off I go. I'm going to clear my annotations for the moment that I've got on the screen, so it's nice and clear. Let's just have a look at what it looks like when I press play. Jump up, land on the block, skid, fall off, and splat. Okay, I think that's a great start. Awesome.
Okay, so boom, we jump to the next keyframe. Nope, that was done. this is. What the heck? Okay, so cut that. It's this thing. Okay, so cut that. Let's say we want to. Yo, yo, yo. I am trying to animate a lamp, actually. I'm like trying to learn how to animate a lamp.
Key that in and key the rotation as well. So now we're there, back there, and then we're going to jump up. And I don't know, jumping around here, and we're going to make an arc, something like that, to land. In fact, we'll probably do with it being a bit closer, but we'll run with what we've got at the moment. So we're going to lift this up. I'm going to put it all the way up there. We're probably going to be a bit more tilted forward and key those in. Then the landing, let's say it's going to be about there. Move it down, rotate it round. Let's key those in. And again, this is rough and ready at the moment. And then of course we're going to rock forward. There's probably going to be a bit of sliding here, but that's also okay because this is something that is going to be sliding, isn't it? Because we're going to, or certainly I'm going to, slide this off ever so slightly. So
Oh yeah,
I'm
I'm just learning it.
It's going to take a little longer to get to the edge, and I know exactly where the pivot point will be. Lift this up. I'm going to put it all the way up there. I'm probably going to be a bit more tilted forward and key those in. Then the landing, let's say it's going to be about there. Move it down, rotate it round. Let's key those in. And again, this is rough and ready at the moment. And then of course we're going to rock forward. There's probably going to be a bit of sliding here, but that's also okay because this is something that is going to be sliding, isn't
like
it? Because we're going to,
or certainly
I'm going to, slide this off ever so slightly. So I'm going to do that. And that's going to take a little longer to get to the edge, and I know exactly where the pivot point will be. Which is about there. And as you can see, this process is a little bit repetitive, and then the crash landing is going to fall off, hit the ground, rotate round, come up a little, yeah, something like that. So that's a reasonable start. So let's just play that through and see how we're looking. We're going to jump up, land, and obviously there's a bit of sliding there, and then we're going to fall off. And that's a really subtle falling. That's not very quick at all. So let's see if we can just drag that back. So get to the edge and then boof. Bit too quick, so we can start tweaking now and moving these keyframes about. Now I'm trying to do the rotation and the movement in one go, if nothing else, for my own sanity. So I've not got tons and tons of keyframes to move around. They're all happening at the same time. That's not necessarily the way you would do all animations. It's just cutting corners at the moment. Right, now we go through and we can do the top bit of the lamp. So we grab the control bone and then we're going to animate that. Now we've lost the other markers here, but we can run through because that is fine. Because this is going to be an independent. So we've got it shifting back, so we're going to key in our starting position, because if we don't do that, we'll lose the information. So we've got a moment here. In fact, at this point, we've got all of the other keyframes where they're happening. So I'm going to press G and just move this back. So I'm going to press the Y. Don't think that can go much further back, actually, because of the limitations we've put on it. So that's fine. And then here, I'm going to skip that other keyframe, and I'm going to start to stretch this out. Maybe even tuck up, ready for the jump. Yes. There we go. And then the jump itself, we're going to stretch out at this point. Key that in. And as we start just going through the process again, so we're going to land here. We're obviously going to be back. Let's key that in. Here, we're leaning further back. Pressing a lot of keys here, and we don't want it to twist through itself. This is one of the issues if you popped your control just a little bit too close to the model, you can end up with it flipping around. In fact, I don't mind it flipping around because it's going to look at us at this point. So let's go jump up, land. That's too quick. You notice it snaps across. So we just need to watch out for that. The way that we can start sorting that out is making sure it's not inside it. So if we go G, X, and then it's definitely looking at us. It's also pulled it towards us as well, which I'm not sure I want. But let's see what it looks like when we animate it. you land. Help me! And at this point, I think the lamp should be looking to its doom. So let's bring this back round. And probably down as well at this point. So let's just run that through. Help! So that swings round and done. Now at this point, we don't want it just splatting on the floor and going through the floor. So we're going to grab this out, pull it out, and it's going to be around there, I think. Make sure we key that in. I almost skipped back then. So we've got this, and it just goes done. I'm going to add in just a little bit of a bounce here. Let's see what that looks like as it comes off. Lands. It's okay. These can probably be a bit closer together to give it the appropriate effect. Let's just, yeah, okay. I'm going to leave it like that. I did say to you guys, didn't I? Do not concentrate on detail, and off I go. I'm going to clear my annotations for the moment that I've got on the screen, so it's nice and clear. Let's just have a look at what it looks like when I press play. Jump up, land on the block, skid, fall off, and splat. Okay, I think that's a great start. Awesome. Let's have a look at it in sort of a semi-rendered mode as well. Make it full screen. Whee! Awesome. Okay, I hope you guys are starting to have lots of fun with this. And don't just stop at one animation. Try a couple of different animations and see which one you like the best. Obviously, I have my storyboard where I've imagined it jumping up like this and then falling off. But really do take the time to just try out some different moves. Perhaps have the lamp jumping on the spot with excitement. It's entirely up to you. How you go about making your animation. Looking forward to seeing them. Please share them over in the discussions, and I'll see you all in the next lecture. Hello everybody and welcome back. In this quick tip, I'd like to show you how to add in keyframes automatically. That sounds like a great thing to do. Unfortunately, I've been caught out by it, so it comes with a warning. It's very straightforward to do. Let's go and head back into our main interface. Let's pause the video, and in this selection of controls, these playback controls here, there's this circle. Automatic keyframe insertion for objects and bones. So it's not going to add in, as it used to previously, add in extra bits and bobs. This is specifically for bones and objects.
Awesome. Look at.
What does it do? Well, if we have a look at the moment, we're on frame 122. So let's pull this back. I'm holding down the middle mouse button. There's no keyframe currently at 122. If I press record,
awesome.
Nothing happens at the moment. So let's say we did want to do something. So let's turn on our overlays, grab the control bone here. I should really hide the other ones so that I'm not risking selecting them or moving them. And I rotate this around the Z-axis to there. Suddenly some keyframes get put in. And if we have a look at the sidebar properties under the item, we can see that all of this has been keyed in, including scale, which is odd because we didn't scale anything, but it's automatically keyed in location, rotation, scale. And similarly, at the top here, if we were to go and grab this and move it around, we see that it automatically keys it in. Now this can be a real nightmare if you didn't realise that you were doing it, and perhaps you were playing it back and you would thought, oh, maybe I'll move it around whilst it's playing back, which at first glance looks like a great idea, but then when we look at it being played back afterwards, you see that you've ended up with a very fidgety lamp, let's put it that way, and that's not what we want. And I've been caught out so many, it looks like he's trying to pull himself along there. I've been caught out so many times when it comes to having this on. I prefer being explicit, telling Blender, yes, I want this to have a keyframe in it. Some people will get on fine with this. I'm forgetful. I'm going to forget to turn that off, and it's going to cause me this sort of mess. Now, if you did accidentally create this sort of mess and didn't realise, you might be square out of luck. That might be impossible to fix, especially if you'd saved your file and opened it up another day. And with your undos, you can see, yes, you can get it there and undo it back again. In fact, I'm going to keep undoing for the moment so that we get rid of everything that we had there previously.
It was going to wake you up.
And yes, there we go. We started off putting keyframes on 122. It's not there anymore.
Oh, okay.
Save my work, make sure I've got
everything
I want it.
Want to see the animated lamp that I just did? Okay. Oh yeah.
So I have to, let me just make my coffee and wash my face.
Well, just real quick. I mean, while you're doing that, you can.
Oh, I can't look at two things at the same time. I should just put them on. Get my stuff cut off.
And that's it for this lecture. This is an incredibly useful tool. I'm going to turn it off and save it. That's what I meant to do there. But use it with caution. That's the main thing to take away from this lecture. Of course.
That I left you.
You left me. That we had made plans to move, and we packed up all the stuff, and my parents had come out to help me with like the rest of it, and we were like getting food and driving around and like finishing up the details and stuff, and I hadn't heard from you all day. And they're like, "Ty, what's going on? Where's the moving truck? What's going on with the rest of your stuff?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't know." And so I was crying all day because like you wouldn't answer the phone. Found out that you changed your phone number.
What?
Didn't tell me. And so I like ended up reaching out to somebody that I knew that you knew, and he was like, "Oh, that's unlike him." He's like, "Yeah, I have his new phone number." He's like, "Let me give it to you." And then I called you all day long, and you didn't answer the phone, and I was like, he left me. Like that's what this is. Like
I left you.
he left me. He moved and took our stuff, and he left me. And then it just turns out that because you had driven the U-Haul first, you got there to the new place and literally just passed out.
Okay.
And so then you messaged me on Facebook a few hours later, and you were like, "Something happened to my phone. That's why I had to get a new number, blah, blah, blah. I was super tired when I got here."
And so you're just like, blah, 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 blah. Steve is over
No,
here.
but then you started insulting me. You were like, "I guess
What?
if you were..." He was like, "I guess if I was as insecure as you, I would react this way too." And
Okay.
I was just like, "Oh my god." But then I was really happy that you didn't leave me. It looks really good, Stephen. Is that what you're trying to show me?
Yeah. But it's like, I did the auto keying thing, and they're like, don't really rely on auto keying because it can cause problems. And I'm like trying to figure out how to like what? What? I feel like I should know what this is, but I don't. What? Oh.
Straightening it up. All of these things are wrong.
No. What? Talking mess? Talking crap? Talking crap?
Like it's not John. So it says do auto. What is that? Is that like to just like auto clean it up?
The automatic, it's like, what is that? The automatic,
The automatic
It's the automatic keying. So like when you do animation, it's keyframes, and so keyframes are just poses. So say like um, for an animation, you have two keyframes for like a punch. There's before you punch, and then there's like there'd be three. So before you punch, the motion of the punch, and then either the punch landing or after the punch, right? And so you could automatically do those for 3D modeling, and you could pose and do those automatic poses without having to make a keyframe. It's just you move on the timeline, and then you just move the character, and then it'll automatically put those keyframes there. But it can cause problems. Mm. That's that.
Value before you start tweaking anything else. So for instance, in this case, I knew it was 0, 0, 0, so then I can key that all in. And then when I press play, it's going to both rotate and move at the same time. So that's it basically, and you can add more and more keys in. Now ideally, you don't want to key every frame. That would make your animation quite jerky, as you can see here. Placing keyframes at specific points will make your animation very smooth. However, what can happen is you might end up with pieces of your model passing through others because you're not explicitly controlling it between these 2 points. You're literally saying between here and here, interpolate between these 2 positions. And we'll talk about the graph editor in a bit, which says how it makes that movement. And at the moment, we're dealing with the timeline and shortly the dope sheet. Cube or rotate it or scale it. Let's do this now. Let's press G, move the cube. Then we go over to the area that we want to key and press I. And there we go. That is now keyed in.
Okay.
What happens when we play this back? Well,
you call me insecure.
Wow.
Don't say wow, you said it. Dream Steven was like, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, last night I got an email that was just like, your payment is due, and I could not log in on my phone or on the website. On my phone, I was like, oh my god, the time has come. This credit card has turned out to be fake. What time is it? Okay, never mind. I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
It's 9:53.
I'm saying stuff to you. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Were you going to say anything about what I said?
You're talking about how I'm leaving you and all
Not
this
that
stuff in your
part.
crazy dream.
You could respond to that. You can't just be like, oh, that's ridiculous, so I'm not even going to say anything to her. That's not right, Steven, and you know that. Even just saying that out loud sounds just mean and rude.
But this is exactly what I'm talking about.
No, but it's just like, okay, yeah, obviously it's a dream and it's ridiculous, but you can't just decide that it's ridiculous and then not talk to me.
I'm not talking to you. I'm listening to you.
You're listening, but it's like I would like you to converse with me. Respond.
Okay, well. Wait, so when is the doctor thing?
Right now, log in. The computer's already on. When I do it, I'd be like, well, shit, I missed it.
And how long is it till? Okay. No, I'm just asking. I'm conversing. Yes.
I'm not running out of hair products, but I have quite a bit of products that aren't good for my hair.
Mm-hmm.
So I really need to do some research. I finally did the porosity test for my hair.
And
It just told me that I'm basically buying, and potentially, not basically, but potentially buying the wrong products for my hair.
that's not good.
Which is why it reacts the way that it does. So overall, I think that Game of Thrones is a good show, right?
Sure.
But there were just some serious, some serious blunders that they just don't fix. Obviously, the final season, the frickin' coffee cup in the background.
Yeah.
As one example. But another, in one of the scenes, this is the opening scene. One of the guys is walking around and he's holding the hilt of his sword like this, right? And then if this is the beginning of the sword, past the wrist guard, right?
Yeah.
He's holding it here.
Hey.
And it's like, bro, you're holding your blade. What are you doing? So just little things like that. It's like obviously the swords coach or whoever should have been like, oh, stop it, we gotta redo this. He's holding his sword crazy. Just the little things.
I mean, the little things that, people pay attention to.
Yeah.
But there's, I mean, you could look at movies, you could look at all types of stuff, and
Yeah, I know. My favorite one is in Buffy the Vampire Slayer in one of the fighting scenes. I mean, there's a lot in Buffy actually, but
yeah, especially TV.
but in this one, my favorite one is when Buffy is fighting, or Angel is fighting someone like in the final season in a crypt, and he throws a barrel, and it was supposed to make obviously like a crashing sound, but instead it was like pling 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 pling, it made a plastic jug bouncing sound.
What the heck?
I was like, oh my gosh, what? And I said, Ryan, come listen to this. And we played that shit over and over and over again because it was hilarious. It just did not fit.
Like, yeah, I used to watch, like those fail videos.
Yeah.
Or not the fail videos, but just like what they would mess up on. And then it's really weird to see when I like watch a movie,
Yeah.
like in theaters for the first time, and I'm like, crap, nobody saw this? Nobody realized this?
Physician and serves as the Deputy Chief Medical Officer for the County of San Diego's Health and Human Services Agency. In
Well, they
this
can,
role,
but
she actively supports
getting ready to
access
hop
to
off.
quality and timely
Okay.
evidence care in
Only
the
go
San
from 8 to 10.
San Diego communities.
Oh,
She's passionate about improving health
No.
of
Wait, who
underserved
can't hear us?
communities. She earned her
Well, they
BA
should be
from
able to hear
Yale
us.
University with
Is this
special
a Zoom
educational
session, or?
major focused on understanding
Yeah, we'll see if
people's
the
views of
microphone is
themselves
turned off.
and their environment. She earned her MD at the University of Missouri, Columbia, where she published research on family violence with her mentors in the Division of Family and Community Medicine. She was awarded a Health Policy Fellowship with the American Medical Students Association, later working as a program analyst in the Office of the Surgeon General. She completed her residency in the Family and Community Medicine in Minnesota and promptly moved to San Diego, where she initially served as the medical director of the Imperial Beach Community Clinic. She has been honored to care for 4-generation families while serving leadership roles at several additional community health centers in the San Diego County for more than a decade. Please join me in welcoming her today to this session. Before we launch forward, I wanted to tell you how to be able to ask questions.
What you should do the asking.
Sorry, my computer is going on me. So please, at the bottom you will see a simple button for the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So use it and type your question
I
in
don't
that
know
pop-up box. And we will answer those at the end. Dr. Tudor will start with an introduction, with a brief introduction, about 15 minutes about coronavirus, and then we will spend a lot of the time answering your questions. So thank you again for being with us. We appreciate your time, and I'm turning it over to you.
Hello everyone. I am working on this keyboard here. We practiced it, there we go. We practiced it 5 minutes ago and I got the hang of it. So hello, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go through some objectives in a brief slideshow today, and then we're going to focus, as Hala said, in taking all of your questions. So I'm Jen Tudor. Thank you for joining us and already seeing some of the questions. I know that some of our challenges here with COVID-19 and this new coronavirus are that it's new. We don't know a lot about it, and just everything is changing.
The
day
challenge
by
is
day.
that it's new.
So what we're going to go through today is looking at some
Yes.
facts about how to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And
Hello
what
everybody
it's all,
and welcome. In this lecture we're going to have an
what it is,
overview
how it
of
affects
the
our
dope
body,
sheet
and
editor.
what those
Now this is the
goals
type of
public
editor that's
health
going to look
views are
incredibly
affecting
familiar.
our
If we have a look at the
population,
bottom of the screen at the moment, we have ourselves
in
the
our
timeline.
nation and in
Now
the
the
world.
timeline is going to
We're
look
gonna talk
very
a little
much
more about
like the
what
dope sheet
social
editor when we get to it.
distancing is
Now there are a
and why
couple of
it's
ways of getting
important,
to it.
since
Eventually
that's
we
so
will just
much of a
modify our
media
view that we've got at the
focus
moment.
and a
However,
key
if we
public
go to the
health
very top and click on
intervention.
animation,
And we're going to talk
we can
about
go to the
flattening
animation
the
workspace.
curve
We're not
and why
currently
that
using
matters.
this, and we can adjust this bottom area.
So,
Now you
going
may be
on to
forgiven for
the
thinking that was
next
another
slide,
timeline, but no.
coronavirus
This
is
is the
a
dope
new
sheet editor. So
virus
you look at it and go,
that was
well, hang on a
identified
minute,
in
let's
an
go back to
outbreak
layout.
of respiratory
Okay, what's
illnesses
going on
first
here?
discovered
Well, it
in
looks
Wuhan,
like if
China.
we select our items in
So,
our
what
scene,
we mean by a
well,
new
what's the difference
virus
here? We've got
is there is a
circles
group of
and squares on their
coronaviruses.
side.
Everyone's
Okay,
seeing the little
well, there is a bit
crowns
more
around
difference
the
than that.
virus on the
Essentially, the dope
microscope
sheet editor
view,
gives
and
us
that's why it's
far more
called
granular control over
coronavirus.
what is happening
However,
than just
most
the
of those
timeline itself.
coronaviruses
So
have been
let's
around
switch
for a
out
while, and
the
we're very
timeline
familiar with
editor
them because they
for the
give us
dope
the
sheet.
common
So I'll
cold.
switch that out there, and I'm going to
There
lift
are
this up so we
different
can see a bit
kinds
more
of
of our
new
scene. Now you may
coronaviruses
notice
that
here that these
have
have
evolved
certain
over the
drop downs.
last
We can just click on them
almost
and they'll
20
go down, and
years
whoa,
that
we've
are
got
called
lots of information there.
zoonotic
And you may
viruses
be
that
wondering
start
what this
in
look
animals,
is all about.
and as
Well,
our
if you remember,
population
we named our
expands in
two
the
main
world and as
bones
we
that we're
encroach
using
on
to
some
control
animal
our
habitats,
lamp itself.
we
We've got the
start
look
getting
bone,
some of
which
those
is that circle
viruses
one
in
there,
humans
sorry, the sphere,
that
and
normally
then the
had
big
just
circle
been
one,
in people.
stem
So
or
this is
base,
a
one of those
virus
two. So if we go into
similar
pose mode,
to
we can select those
SARS
individually,
and
and we can
MERS
see the
that
name
had
changes
started
accordingly
in
there
animal
as well. And if
populations
we
and
shift
crossed
select
over
both
to
of them,
infect
then
humans.
we will also get
In March
all of the
11th,
information,
the
and we can
World
drop
Health
that down and see what's
Organization
happening and where.
announced
Now,
that
one of the things you will notice here is
which
that
is the
we have
disease,
orange dots
CO for
everywhere,
corona,
and these are our
VI
keyframes,
for
but we've also got these
virus,
orange
and
backgrounds,
D
and we've
for
also
disease.
got at the very
So
top, middle clicking to drag around,
so 2019
we've also got
is when
orange
it
dots
was
at the
first
top. So what do these all
detected and
mean? Well, let's
identified.
close the base and the
That
look down and
disease
start at the
is
very top
now
of the
a
hierarchy.
pandemic, has
So
been
in
since March
summary,
11th,
something is happening on
because
these
it is,
frames. Frame 1,
having
frame
outbreaks and
12, frame
epidemics in
18,
multiple
frame
countries throughout
25,
the world.
etc, etc. And we can see that
So
we're
the
specifically
name of the
talking about an
virus
armature
that
being
is
moved.
causing
Now bear in mind you can
COVID-19
animate
is
other things as well, not just an armature,
SARS-CoV-2.
but we can move
So
objects.
SARS
We'll be
for
moving the
severe
camera in a
acute
bit as well, so we will see
respiratory
that under
syndrome,
this
COVID
summary
for the
at the same
COVID
time.
virus
Then we're talking about the
2.
armature action,
So we
and it's
know that
specifically
the
referring
first
to two
episode of
bones
SARS
that we're
was
controlling.
from a
And
virus
in this case, we're
SARS-CoV-1
controlling
that was in about
where that control bone
2003 from
is
China.
and what
And
its
now
rotation
the
is as
name
well.
of
And we can
this
see that in
virus
both
is
aspects here.
SARS-CoV-2,
Now these orange
and
lines are
COVID-19
quite
is the
clearly an
disease.
indicator that
So
something
our
is
understanding of
continuing.
that
And if we
changes
have a
daily.
look, let's
Everything
drill
we
in
know
on the
about
X
that,
location of the look, which is the sphere
really
just here. So let's
expands day
only have
by
that one
day.
selected.
And part
Now
of
if
the
we look along here,
challenge
we've
is,
got
who do we
an
listen
orange
to?
continuous
What's
line
the
all the way
best
up to
news source
100.
and everything
And
else?
if we left
I
click
will
and just
tell
pull
you
across
in
the
this
top here, you'll see that the location,
I'm
the X
relying
location,
on two
doesn't
main
change
sources.
until
One is
that
the
point.
CDC,
So to demonstrate that
and the
even more, if you go to
second
this
is
middle
for
one
the
here, which is currently
statistics, Johns Hopkins
0.028,
University
and
from
just
the
change
very
it,
beginning
press the I
has
key to key that in, we can see that that continuous change there
hotspot
is now
map
broken.
of
I'm going to
both
undo
the
that because I
world
don't want to
and the United
mess up
States, and
my
now by
previous
counties
animation
in
there.
the United
So that's
States,
it, gives you a nice overview of what's
So
happening.
those are the two
And one of the biggest things
resources that
here
I'm
is to
relying
take
upon,
away the
and
fact
I
that
think
this is
what's
when
important is
things are
one, pick
happening.
a good
So one of the
resource,
things that I really
and
like
then
doing with the
follow
dope
it
sheet
through
is just
time, so
controlling
you
when
know
things
that
happen.
data
So for instance, if we go ahead
is
and press the spacebar here to
happening
play it, and we
in a
decide that,
systematic
okay,
way.
it takes
You're
far
counting
too
apples and apples,
long to
not
land.
apples and oranges.
So we go to 101.
So
What we can then do is
it's so much
minimize
in
the
the
look
news, one,
and actually
because it's
pull
new,
everything
and
back.
two,
So we can select the
because it's
keyframes that we
affecting
want.
more
In this
than
case, I'm just
3
going to key in
million
the look
people
area, and
in
you'll
the
notice that
world.
the
So
top
we
one
have
also
almost 3
highlights,
million
which would
cases
indicate
as
to me
of last
that
night
that is
in
the
the world.
only thing that this
And
top level
so
on the summary
we
is
are
referring to. And then I can just press
continuing to
G
focus
and
on
move
that
it to a
and
different
learn
time, so I
about
can have
that.
it looking at us
You can see the
sooner.
Johns Hopkins
Then we can
map
go ahead, we
here,
can select
the
the base
world
down here
map,
and
the
perhaps pull
hotspot,
that back
and
as
so
well.
on the total
Now let's see what that looks like
confirmed
when we go
cases
ahead and
as
play
of
it. So
last
we've got it
night
jumping
were
up, and then it lands
2,971,000+.
much quicker than it did before. And that is a far
United
better
States is the
experience.
most
Okay,
has
so
the
in
most
summary,
number
our
of
dope sheet
confirmed
editor
cases.
allows us to
So
finally
these are
control
the
when
PCR
movements
tests
are
that
happening. And this is going to become
in the
critical when
world.
we start
And that's
refining
by
our
quite a
animation
lot.
over the next couple of lectures to produce our final
And then
animation
you
itself.
can look at
The other thing that the dope sheet
mortality
editor
by
allows us
country.
access to
So these
is a
are all
couple of
from
other
Johns
views.
Hopkins. You
For
can
instance,
see
if
the
we wanted to
citation
make
on the
multiple
bottom,
actions,
and
is.
we
This is
can look
very
at the
important
case
if you were having
fatality
an
rate here,
idle
which
animation. You
varies
can
by
set that as an
country.
idle
So you
action,
can see
and then you can
Germany
have a
is as
walking
low as
animation or a jumping
3.8%,
animation and have them as individual
but Belgium
actions.
is highest
That's a
with
much better
18, and
setup
here in the
than
United
having
States we're
actions spread out, as you
5.7.
might have seen
There
before,
are various
just on one
things that
continuous
can affect
timeline.
the case
We've got the
fatality
shape
rate
key editor,
because
then we
it
have
gives
some
the
more
number of
specialist
people who
modes that we can
died
switch the dope
as
sheet
the
into as well.
numerator
But for the
divided
moment,
by
that
the number
concludes
of
our
people
overview of the
with
dope sheet.
known
Incredibly
disease.
useful being able
That's
to
the
manipulate
denominator.
when
So you
things
can
are happening,
imagine
so
that
when
the
those
more
keyframes.
testing that occurs
So that's it
in
for
a
this lecture,
country,
and I'll see you all
then that
in the
case
next one.
fatality rate can be lower. But if we're only testing those people, for example, who end up in the hospital, then we know we're going to have a higher case fatality rate just because
Hello
we're
everybody
not
and welcome
capturing
back. In
all
the
those
last lecture we had a
people
look at the
who
dope sheet
have
editor,
COVID-19,
and it's not by
but
itself,
have
it comes with a
very
partner.
mild
If we go and
case
switch to it
don't
now,
need to
the
be
graph
hospitalized.
editor.
So
Now the graph
each
editor
county is a little bit different in the
different
United States.
to the dope
Here
sheet
in
editor
San
simply
Diego,
because
where I
it
live,
allows us to change the
about
transition
23%
between those
of
keyframes.
persons with
Let's have a look
COVID-19
specifically at this point
end
where
up in
our
the
lamp is
hospital,
landing. Now,
and
if
8
we
to
look
9%
purely
of
at the
people
up and
with
down
COVID
parts of this
19
animation,
end
so we're
up
looking
in
at the
the
z-axis,
intensive
which is
care
this
unit.
blue
So that's
line.
about 30
Remember
plus
here we've got the
percent
base
of people
selected,
who
we're
are
talking about the
hospitalized
base
end up in the
control bone
ICU.
only.
And
Let's
we had a
highlight the blue
case
line,
fatality
and you do
rate
that not by clicking on the
somewhere
line, but
around
clicking on
3%,
one of the control points.
2-3%.
When we click on a control
So
point,
those
we get a
numbers
handle,
vary
much
by
like
the
how we're used to
testing.
controlling
It
curves.
also
And as you
varies
probably
by
guessed, if we tweak that, it will
the
change how
population.
the
So if you have
transition
an
happens.
older
In fact, if we go nuts
population,
and do something
if you
like
have a more
that,
dense
set the playhead back to
population,
the
if you
beginning,
have
let's
more
see what
people
happens. It's
with
going to
high
shoot up
blood
and come back
pressure,
down again, because that's
diabetes,
exactly what this
asthma, and
graph is
different
doing.
kind of risks, all
Let's
of
talk
that
about this a
affects
little.
the case
How does
fatality
gravity
rate.
work? Well, because we're simulating gravity at this point, we don't have to,
So
by the
how
way. We
is
could
our
turn
outbreak
off the
growing?
animation and turn it back on
Well,
later on and
in
let
the
the
United
lamp fall
States,
absolutely naturally.
on Saturday, so this data is reported in Johns Hopkins for the day before, on Saturday we had more than 32,000 new cases identified in the United States and almost 2,000 people dying. So you can see by the graph below that in April we started that upward linear trend.
Jesus.
Let's talk a little bit about the spread. And that's been huge questions, and that's been an area of research that we are learning day by day, and different studies are being published. And it's great that we have so much information in our peer-reviewed journals so that when information is published, we can compare to other studies. And it's almost been like a dialogue in those peer-reviewed journals, because there'll be an opinion, there'll be some publication of very small numbers, someone else will then publish, and we continue to learn, but in this incredibly rapid way. So the spread of COVID-19 is between person to person, and that is the most common spread, we think, and especially by coughing, sneezing, singing, talking, we give out this virus, if we have it in our body, in small respiratory droplets. There's also some aerosolized virus, which is in much smaller particles, but the respiratory droplets that contain the virus are heavy. They go out about 6 feet from our body, and then they drop. If your hand's in the way, they drop on your hand. If your desk is in the way, they drop on the desk, and they can drop on your clothes and so forth. So we recommend that people stay 6 feet away from each other, just to prevent that area of respiratory droplets from landing on you. And we get infected with the virus if it is in our eyes, our nose, our mouth, and that's why we say the most important thing is to wash your hands. So if we have contact with items that have the virus on them and we wash our hands, we're okay. If we have contact with the virus on different surfaces and we rub our nose, we rub our eyes, we have our pizza and eat it, then we could get infected with the virus at that point. Lots of investigations ongoing, and especially around the aerosolized particles, how long they can live. And what we don't know yet is, just because there's virus on something and it can survive potentially even for a couple days, is that virus still infectious?
Okay,
Can we get the
and
disease
that
by
is
touching a 2 or 3 day
it
old
for today.
virus
I
and then rubbing
learned a
our
little bit
nose?
about that.
That we don't
I should
know yet.
finish the
So symptoms, also we're
the
learning more and more about the
animation
most
section
common
this week,
symptoms.
so
I've listed them
pretty
in
pleased
order,
about
at
that.
least of the
So
top 5 or
adios.
6.
Deuces.
So fever is up to 80%, 80 to 90% of folks have a fever. A cough, often productive, meaning you're coughing